All right, we're live streaming.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our September 12th CVTA TAC meeting. Then I get my agenda in front of me. So today we're going to get started. Janice, can you do a roll call and certification of a quorum, please?
Yes, give me 1 second. I have one more person moving over. Okay, Town of Ashland, Miss Amos.
Here.
Thank you. Charles City County, Miss Russell. Miss Russell. We have Miss Russell. She may be having problems with her audio. We'll check back. Mr. Mitchell. Chesterfield County, Miss Smith, Vice Chair Smith.
Here.
Miss Walker.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Goyne.
Here.
Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Vadunez. 1 second, let me move one other person over. Mr. Flagg. Henrico County, Mr. Yor.
Here.
Miss Smidler. New Kent County, Mr. Stodder.
Here.
Miss Leduc. Powhatan County, Mr. Shardine. City of Richmond, Sheriff Clark.
Here.
Mr. Bridewell. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson is here sitting in for Tiffany.
All right, thank you. VDOT, Mr. Mann.
Here.
Mr. Riblett.
He's on his way in.
Okay. Miss McAdory. Virginia Port Authority, Miss Nelson.
Here.
GRTC, Miss Torres.
Here.
Miss Sink. RMTA, Miss Dean.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
Awesome. Item number 3, consideration. Hey, Mark.
Can you hear me?
Item number 3, consideration of amendments of the agenda. Are there any considerations needed for amendment? Hearing none, we'll move to item 4, approval of our.
Janice, we are on, Mark, Liz, and Larry are on from Richmond District right now.
Thanks, Mark.
You're mute, your speakers are
I know, I'm trying to do that.
Let's give VDOT a moment.
That's to hear them.
right.
And then
Okay, perfect.
There we go.
Do we have a motion for approval of our August 8th CVTA TAC meetings minutes?
So moved.
Second, Barb.
All right, those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Awesome, that motion carries. Item 5, public comment period. Check, do we have anyone signed up or on the line that wants to make any comments?
We do not. We do have a new statement that needs to be read according to the new FOIA laws. Madam Chair, I'd be happy to read that if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay, this is in the agenda and it's printed there. This is one of the updates that happened when the FOIA regulations were changed recently. So this needs to be read every meeting during the public comment period. This meeting is being held via Zoom. A link to the Zoom webinar where individuals may register to participate is posted at the top of this agenda. Members of the public are invited to submit public comments either verbally or in writing. Written comments can be submitted through the Q&A or chat function on Zoom or to the email address at the top of this agenda. Written comments will be read aloud or summarized during the meeting when possible and will be included in the meeting minutes. Verbal comments will be taken at this time. Please indicate through the Q&A and chat functions on Zoom if you would like to comment. When acknowledged by the chairman, please clearly state your name so that it may be recorded in the meeting minutes. And at this point, we do not have anyone requesting to speak or noted under the Q&A at the bottom.
All right. Hearing no public comments, we'll move to item 6. I don't have any CVTA TAC chair report today. So we'll go right into item 7. This one seems we're gonna have some reviewing of the parking lot items for the project selection and allocation framework. Ms. Walker.
Hello, everybody. Okay. Let's see.
Hey, Jessica.
Hey, everybody. I guess we had a few items that we started to discuss revisiting the framework that might need some updating. Turn on my. Sorry, you guys, trying to get my video together. Here we go. Okay. We talked about a few items, and I think priority-wise, we probably should pick back up on the schedule for the next round of regional applications. Since last round we were doing an intake at the end of the year, we need to figure out when we would be taking in the next round of applications. And I think I'm just going to pull up notes from where we left off, but I'll throw out to the group an option out there is to, we talked about should it be annual or every other cycle, and kind of align in the right order when Smart Scale comes around. So for example, we have Smart Scale applications pending. We'll find out the scores early next year with the CTB voting on the final projects July of next year. So we had some discussion about waiting to submit applications until after Smart Scale projects have been selected and the CTB has finalized by July. So taking in applications after that, we were thinking like September, beginning of like September 1st, and then doing that every other year, since we all are leveraging, not all, but people are leveraging funds, and Smart Scale being selected or not has implications on how you would apply for your next round. So I guess I can open that up to the group for consideration. Again, being off cycle to Smart Scale, taking in apps September after we know about the Smart Scale results. So I'll throw that out to the group if anyone wants to add or share thoughts on that one. Let's see.
Chat said, just to clarify, we're talking about every other year.
Mm-hmm.
This change, yeah.
So we would not be submitting, if we were to choose this route, we would not be submitting any applications until next September 1st. And then we would skip the following September and then, yeah, every other year.
And I guess just to add some conversation to it, we think that it's a, fairly good idea, especially with the Smart Scale. But I did have the question in regard to those authority members that may come in and have specific projects or have some things that they want to put through the regional process, and how we really address those. I think we talked through that, Chessa. So if you maybe want to explain that for those that may not, know whether or not it'll be a good idea to do every other year or not.
Yeah, so I think we had some discussions that, if a need came in off cycle, that one approach could be that the applicant who has a need that comes up outside of cycle could bring that request to the authority. TAC would vet that and make a recommendation to the board, and ultimately the board members could decide if they wanted to figure out a way to accommodate that request off cycle, but that we would not have, that we wouldn't document in the framework that was a restriction, that we would leave that open and let the board decide with it, with some advice from TAC, whether, from an information standpoint, vet it, and then let the board members decide to take those in. So, should we?
Yeah, it looks like Barb has her hand up and then Austin.
Just to comment on the September 1 proposal, I think that we've heard comments, and I get my groups mixed up. It might have been finance. I feel like we've heard some comments from either the full authority or finance that they want to know what is going to come out of Smart Scale in order to kind of know what it is they're working with, like how much money is tied up because it did get Smart Scale funding and how much it has been freed up. So just hearing those kind of conversations, I think there's a desire to wait until Smart Scale applications are finalized.
Austin?
Yeah, I don't know if any of this conversation has taken place yet, but I guess the mid-cycle the mid-cycle applications, if we were to bring them into the policy board, has any thoughts or discussion taken place as far as would it be an additional funding request that you'd be making, or would there have to be redactions from previously awarded projects awarded to this mid-cycle ask?
And Austin, I think that there is a slight difference between mid-cycle and off-cycle, only in that mid-cycle would be something we would write in the framework to say would occur, and then off-cycle is just a new term we came up with to say that you could make a request outside of it. And I think if we're not going to put anything in the framework, then it seems like your request is up to you to whether or not it's an amount that's in the regional plan already or outside of it, if we're not going to create any, policy or procedure to go with it.
And that off-cycle one would be kind of the same tone where it's, I guess, up to the locality with what they want to do, how they want to ask for that?
I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
So far.
Okay.
Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, and I don't see Eric on the meeting. Oh yeah, there he is. I'll defer to Eric, but I just looked through the enabling legislation that created the authority, and I don't see anything that requires an annual allocation of regional funds. To the point of the previous conversation, we do say that in the framework document as it stands, that it shall be on an annual basis. So whether we do an off cycle or just kind of a every other year at roughly that same timeline, the September, that's what we pick. Maybe we kind of consider, where the projects are, where applications are, and if anything needs to be changed, modified, added, or deleted. I think that's probably reasonable. I guess my only concern would be is if we start considering projects on a one-off basis, we're potentially running into a problem with, putting everything in a project list and going through a cost benefit relative comparison project as opposed to funding things on a one-off. Not that there may not be occasions we need to do that. So I don't know what the answer is. I just raise that as a caution.
Yeah, good point.
As far as Todd's comment on the code and what that requires, I think his characterization of the code in that regard is correct.
Thank you, Eric. I never liked playing attorney, but so I'm glad you were here.
Happy to jump in.
And then another thing that comes to mind is, will the authority members be unsure, every middle part of the smart skill cycle, or is this something that's just happening this first year that they are, hesitant about, and whether or not, because Todd brings up a good point with the one-off basis and how we manage that process and I guess rank that request amongst other projects.
Yeah, I guess, so if someone submitted a request, they had some economic development need that came in outside of the normal cycle, they make the request for a certain amount of dollars. I'm assuming that per the code, if the board's going to consider it, it's scored, comes up with the benefit costs, and then there's some discussion about where it fits in with the previously selected projects.
Previously
then,
and upcoming.
Yeah.
Because I feel like everybody, one person submits it, I think everybody is going to try to submit. I don't know.
Well, and I don't know if
I don't know
if it's too difficult for us to try to put constraints around the request, that it needs to be something.
And so I was just thinking, do we leave it at annual, but simply say, like, have the board the authority put out that there won't be any application this year? Or do we, go ahead and commit to the 2 with so many questions?
Yeah, I think we're struggling, we want to entertain some flexibility, but this, what's the balance?
Austin?
One thought was just maybe the smart scale off year. So every odd year we could do, new requests, and maybe every smart scale year because we wouldn't have to go through maybe the full validation process. It's existing projects that need adjusting or amended requests. Just something I thought of.
Yeah, and I thought that came up before when we talked about whether or not the mid-cycle was an adjustment period. I don't know. I remember because we met trying to discuss the prioritization ourselves. And I don't know if we talked ourselves out of that one, but Barb, do you remember?
I like that idea, using the off years to review existing. But we should be doing that kind of on a regular basis anyway. We've got the quarterly reports that we're using for local. I'm not quite sure with regional, but I would think that we're probably looking at our regional projects quarterly also and seeing where we are as far as schedule and estimates go. So having specifically designating the off year, we might not really need to do because we probably should be doing it regularly anyway. But that might be a good idea.
And I think some of Austin's was also kind of additional dollars on a project. So not, potentially just scheduling cost overruns, but actually, I don't know if you would call it, just increase in request. Chet?
Thanks. I just wanted to get clarification on what I think I heard Austin saying, which sounded like it was opposite of what Barb was saying. Where following smart scale, you would be cleaning up and adding to existing projects based on what the outcomes of the smart scale process were. And then in the off year, you would do new stuff.
No, so I was saying. in
You were
the-
saying the other way? Okay.
Yeah, in the smart scale off year, so this coming September 1st would be any new requests for new projects that haven't gone through any validation, because then VDOT's freed up. If we agree to have VDOT be a part of that validation process, they're free.
Gotcha.
So yeah, September 23. So does anyone else have any thoughts on us moving on every other year, which again, we did hear some authority members support that from the Finance Committee, which would make next September 2023 the open period for new projects, with, I guess, between now and then, some ability to amend existing projects.
Hey, Jerona, what do you mean by that? Amend existing projects?
Yeah, so that would be your scheduling, I guess, like costs, overruns. You all know more of these terms that projects come up with. And then specifically I said amend because that to me talks about adding money or increasing money, which is a statement that Austin has made. Todd, Barb, are you still thinking? Are you? I don't want to move too fast.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking. Yeah, I feel like we will be, as projects move through project development, estimates are going to change and additional funding may be required. And that's going to be something that is going to happen, not necessarily every other year. It's going to be something that is happening more regularly. So we're going to be reviewing existing project estimates and schedules on a regular basis. And if additional funds are needed, I think that we're not going to be able to wait.
The cycle.
Yeah.
Which I don't think, I mean, I think it kind of goes a little bit towards what Chester was saying in the beginning, kind of on any need basis. I guess we want to have to establish a regular reviewing of the scheduling, maybe put that in place, either quarterly, or if it's just going to be the locality reviewing their schedule and estimate changes, and they submit something to the TAC by request. Let's see. Todd put his hand down, I think. So Austin and then Chester.
I'll just clean up kind of what I was saying. I don't know if maybe I said it right the first time, that the off year, so this coming September, the non-smart scale year could be any kind of project, so existing or new, but so you have X many applications, whether you're doing existing or new, and then in the off year, it would be only existing projects that need amendments or changes.
Yeah, and Barb is saying to that if it's something such as a scheduling or estimate change, it may need to come quicker than that off year, is what Barb's comment was, to specifically limiting it to the off year period.
So is including cost overruns or anything like that every year, is that, I guess that still wouldn't meet, Barb, what you're looking for?
No, I mean,
Okay.
in the instance of, we're ready to go to add.
Right.
And we updated our engineer's estimate and the market is terrible.
Yep.
All of our unit costs have gone up, then we would need to react to that more quickly.
Yeah, I think that's why it needs to be flexible for the mid-cycle requests for anything like that.
Chester?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask the question. Don't we, CMAQ RSTP, we take in requests any time of year, or we do it at application time? or both?
Both.
Okay, so it would be similar to how we, okay.
Todd,
Yeah, I put my hand down earlier so Barb could finish her thoughts. I didn't want to interrupt that. So I think I'm agreeing with what I think I'm hearing, and that I think we need the flexibility. To Barb's example, if we have a project that goes out to bid and bids come in high, so in order to fully fund the project, before the bids close and the window closes to move the project forward, you may have to come back for more money. That's, I think, similar to the process for CMAQ and RSTBG. But the difference being, at this point anyway, we usually have a balance entry with that program. And as everybody may remember, we've pretty much maxed out our 4-year spending window on CVTA regional with the PAYGO model. The goal is to have a balanced reserve based on the numbers that are in the current framework document. And I think we're going to move towards that. So I think I like that approach, but I caution that it's going to be difficult to do that right now because we've pretty much committed all of the project funding until we see what gets funded through Smart Scale and other sources. Because we have no reserve theoretically.
mm-hmm.
You could theoretically be committed through 28 already.
You mean was the case for the commitment to 64 widening?
Correct. That's not including the Smart Scale wins.
Yeah. So yeah, you basically have to go to out years at that point. So that may be a good approach, but I guess we have to be very cautious to not overcommit all of our out year funding before we go through the full process again.
Mm-hmm.
This is Barb.
Yes,
Following up on what Todd said, once we know about Smart Scale and what projects the leveraging that we got through CVTA is, what some of those funds will go back to the pot. So that will give us some of our balance entry. So I don't think we could ask for any additional funds for existing projects until like September 24, if we were going to have sort of this more formal, once a year like we do with CMAQ and RSTP. We could start that September 1 of 24. So anyway, if that's helpful in kind of thinking it through.
And that's if everyone with Smart Scale does not want to resubmit.
Ooh, that's a very good point, because the framework allows you to keep that money and go after Smart Scale another round. So yeah, probably a lot of people are just going to hang on to it. Good point.
Yeah, I was just expanding on that. Yeah, so I was saying if that's a good what Todd was saying. So if we were going to entertain projects off cycle, whatever the term is, we would need to beef up our balance entry or our reserve amount, or we're kicking out projects. We're agreeing to move project, this one overtakes that one, and I don't know that we want to do that. So yeah, we would. And then the point about, that's right, the point about folks wanting to use the leveraging dollars for another try. So that would be held up. So yeah, that's a good point that Todd had.
All right.
So beyond, anything that gets kicked out and not resubmitted through Smart Scale, keep in mind as we move through the calendar, we will be picking up out years of, regional funding. So I think eventually it will fix itself. With the reserve amounts, but I just caution that in the meantime, we're pretty committed without canceling things. or to Chet's point, committing out your funding that hasn't gone through the full vetting process with the full project list, which is problematic.
So, and I know, Chester, you have potentially other parking lot items. So I think that, I question how we want to go about moving forward. Like, are we going to vote to approve certain things? Barb?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing and was going to just suggest an informal kind of consensus. Is there agreement that we will take a look September 1 of 23, whether there's capacity to request new projects, and if there is, we'll take applications due on September 1st of 23, and then our intent will be on the off years or whatever, on the non-new project application years, we'll review existing projects for additional funding needs. So I'm good with that, and just want to see if we can. I don't know how we want to do that. Do we vote or?
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Chet.
I like what Barb is saying. I think a good way forward would be not to vote now, but to put together something on paper that says, here's what TAC has discussed, and basically start working through and seeing what Finance Committee members think. Maybe I would assume we want to go through the whole process and then take a vote next month.
Yeah, I just kind of want to know if the group here agrees with that approach. And it seems like it, but if someone objects, they need to speak up. Otherwise, we're going to put that on the list as we've talked it through and we're good with this idea.
Sounds like everybody's okay with it. Chester, do you have more items?
So I was trying to prioritize the items, thinking, what's the most pressing we need to vet. So we did the funding cycle and schedule, so that's good. There was a lot of discussion about revisiting eligibility. And that one that's a big lift, I think. But I know there was a lot of concern and folks wanted to revisit eligibility requirements for projects. So I don't know where we start with that. I don't know, Austin, if you wanted to kick us off.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up with eligibility that I don't know how the definition comes out, like what it looks like 6 months from now, but the definition of regional, like we have it now, I don't think works for the smaller localities, because we've got 2 to 3 miles maybe of vehicles per day that exceed 20,000. And those roads are already wide enough. So I don't know. And I think I noticed on the working document that you shared a link for that there was a thought maybe we classify the definition a little differently in certain localities, or the smaller localities, maybe there's a different lens that's looked under, whereas the current lens, if it's changed or not, still applies to some of the bigger localities. Because we have roads that we would consider regional that serve Powhatan and some of the other counties not in this group that could benefit from some work, but it's hard to find funding opportunities for them.
So it's easier for me to think through specific examples. So if you have you're saying you have some roads that you could make a case that they are regional and that they don't just serve localized county.
Right. I mean, so I'll give you one, Fairground Road with an extension. It's more or less an extension of the Oilville exit off of 64 to our courthouse. And then it's almost a direct line to Powhatan County. Oldville Road, where it turns into Hanover Road, goes into Hanover County. There's some intersections along Ashland Road that might need some work that benefit Goochland and Hanover. It would be a way to maybe find some of the to find money for some intersections that wouldn't otherwise, or some road work that wouldn't otherwise get funding, because they're not going to have the numbers to even score well with smart scale or anything like that.
Okay. We went through this last round. I think it's
Okay.
how do we define regional, and where do you slice that up? Where do you cut that off? I'm going to be quiet and see if others have comments on that one.
Barb has her hand up.
Yeah, I do want to go back to what we talked about when we developed the framework document, that, the CVTA was set up thinking of a vehicle to get some really large regional projects, regional as a whole, regional projects funded, and projects that were not successful in smart scale. And there are still a lot of those big projects out there. And the way the code is written, it specifically sets aside 35% for regional projects and 50% for local. If everyone were supposed to get a slice of each of those pots of money, they would have just made it all local. And they didn't. It's important to remember that, in Chesterfield, citizens in Chesterfield are driving over in Henrico and Goochland, just like the other way around. Just because people are leaving your boundary, or you can't get a project funded within your boundary, doesn't mean that your citizens aren't benefiting from regional projects.
Rhonda?
All right, can you all hear me?
Yes. Or we can't hear anything now.
Yeah, I just decided to open up my laptop, so give me a second. So I thank you, Bob, for your comments, and I just want to go back and review our commitment relative to project review from our first set of projects that were scored. And if I'm wrong, please tell me if I'm not remembering the details correctly. But what gave me some sense of comfort as a small community was that we would see how scoring shook out and what was funded and how the smaller localities fared. Is that what everybody else remembers as our agreement?
Yep, and that's why we're having the conversation.
Right. Okay. So that's what I remember. And then with respect to our projects, not that I disagree, but we submitted two for both RSTP and CMAC, one on Wilcox Neck Road, very much internal to Charles City County, but anticipated additional trips of heavy vehicles to serve what we believe is a significant economic development project, and then a project on Roxbury Road. Wilcox Neck Road made sense to me in terms of not being eligible for funding, although I just wonder why that discussion didn't come up before we put so much effort, energy, and cost into programming the project costs, why it didn't come up before all of that work was done. But Roxbury Road, not much so, because it is what we call our golden corridor. It's our greatest potential for economic development, manufacturing, and industrial, and it connects to neighboring communities, so it has a regional impact. Our projects were, both of them, but I want to focus on the one, Roxbury Road, were disqualified as ineligible very early on in the process. And so our concern really is, as a small community with 80% of our population that is employed, because we do have an older community out migrating to the Richmond metropolitan area for employment, do we really have any, given the current framework for how projects are scored and selected, do we have any real potential to have support through CVTA to fund projects in Charles City County? And consistent with our commitment for the first rounds of project funding, I think that we should revisit the impact for how our scoring and eligibility processes impact smaller communities.
Thank you. Chessa? You're muted.
My comment's a little out of order because I actually wanted to respond to Austin. I heard Rhonda, but just real quick, just specifically, if we revisit, for example, the volume threshold for qualification of a roadway, if we revisit ADTs, just keep in mind that if we lower it, we also have many roads with lower. You're not, everyone's going to have many more segments that are available as well. So
That's right. Well, and that's why I brought up the second half of that, which is maybe the rural, smaller localities get a different lens when it comes to what a regional road is, because I would argue day and night that Route 522 in Goochland and Powhatan is a regional corridor, but it doesn't meet the criteria of CVTA, but it's a U.S. state route. That is one of the many ones that I think we could argue that are regional. Just because Goochland County doesn't have 300,000 people doesn't mean it's not an important project to undertake.
that's true. Definitely not. Yeah. So we're kicking around having different requirements for the rules in terms of regional. That's what I'm hearing. That would not just, we'd have to figure that out, what that looks like. Okay.
Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Austin, I apologize. My familiarity with most of Goochland outside of West Creek is limited, so I have to look up where 522 is.
Dead center.
Yeah, so that crosses between Powhatan, Goochland and Hanover.
It goes from Louisa down the center of Goochland County through the courthouse and down to Powhatan, crossing the James at the 522 bridge, Maidens Road.
Okay.
It's more or less dead center of the county.
Got it. So I also agree with what I think it was Chessa just said regarding volume thresholds, and I know that was a hot topic in previous discussions, so I won't dive into that at this point. I kind of understand both sides of that argument, but one case that I would like to mention, and this to a degree covers Austin's concern and maybe to a certain degree Rhonda's, but where we have roads that cross jurisdictions, whether that be from a rural jurisdiction to a more populated jurisdiction or between two of the more populated jurisdictions. Some of those roads are very important regional roads from the standpoint of getting folks from rural localities to places of employment and so forth, but they don't come anywhere close to meeting volume thresholds, but they're important transportation, part of the transportation network from the standpoint of river crossings and major crossings between jurisdictions. So what I'm hearing outside of this conversation from some of the leadership in the region is there's the expectation that some of these projects will be able to be funded through CVTA regional because they historically have not scored well in smart scale. Because you don't have high volumes, but the volumes that they carry, it's important to the people that use the road. And it also is problematic from some of the funding sources because it involves multiple jurisdictions. So you're somewhat limited in the, how applications are submitted, who submits them and so forth. So I would offer that I think it's beneficial to us as a group to consider some of these jurisdictional connections that don't otherwise meet those threshold criteria. But even if they don't meet the volume criteria, for example, let them go through the scoring process, let them qualify, and then if it's a regional decision not to fund those projects, so be it. But at least they're in the mix.
We have Nora.
Hi there. I had lots of thoughts on this last year. And very similar thoughts this year. I appreciate you all keeping it on the agenda. The only reason I voted for it last year was knowing that we could continue this conversation after having the first round and being able to look through those projects. I'm trying to follow up on some of the items that have already been spoken on. Barb, I think it's a great point that we are a pretty movable region. We have people going from all jurisdictions, and the same thing here in Hanover and Ashland. We have plenty of people coming to work here in the town from Chesterfield, Petersburg, and Henrico. And so I would agree that while we don't meet the ADT, we are serving a regional purpose and have some needs that need to be met that for us, and I don't know how many of you all are aware of this, but for the town, we are not really getting the 50% for local funds. We're getting a small fraction of the funds just based off of the formula and how we split that with Hanover. And so for the town of Ashland, it's really important that we're able to have access to some of the regional dollars as well for some of our larger projects. Obviously not for smaller local projects that shouldn't qualify. And I'm all for regionalism, and I'm all for the greater good, and that, we should be working on some of these larger projects. And while Joe's here, I have to say big thanks to Joe from Hanover and Hanover in general. They do help us. So I don't want to make it sound like we don't work well together, but we do. And so last year, I was hoping that this year that we could readdress the ADT. And as Austin said, in particular, just for the rural localities, or smaller localities, however you want to classify them. Because as Chessa mentioned, if you lower that ADT, everything in Henrico and Chesterfield will qualify, which really would end up defeating the purpose and us still not be able to compete for some of those funds. I think that was all of my points. Thank you again for the opportunity to discuss it.
Thanks, Nora. So I've heard economic development, roadways that are serving, multiple localities. And then kind of what Trust was saying was a lower ADT specifically for rurals. I think personally I'm against two separate types of rules. But I do think that we can come up with, before I've called them like exceptions, or and whether or not those exceptions are for rural only or everyone, but having that ability to provide information on how this roadway or whatever the project is has an economic impact for the region, or so something in which, because of course potentially in other localities, even some of the larger, there may be a project that doesn't meet the criteria as it is, but a business is coming and it's going to bring $500 million worth of economic development to the region. What does that, what can the region do to assist the locality when something like that happens? So just a couple of thoughts on that. I see some more hands. I have Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hello. Just some thoughts. I've really appreciated all the discussion. I'm just trying to take it all in and try to process it. I sent out in the chat a link to the eligibility mapping. If you all, I might suggest that if you haven't, pull that up, and it's kind of helpful to refresh in terms of what we're actually talking about, at least in terms of highway projects. Don't forget there are other categories of projects here, and this discussion is seems to be entirely centered on eligibility with respect to road projects. One thought, and I agree pretty strongly with Barb's initial statements about how the pots have been divided and the intent of those funds and truly regional type projects being designed for the 35% pot. Just kind of studying this map, one thought in terms of expanding the eligibility might be to include primary routes, all primary routes. There are several in Hanover, and I imagine there are probably a couple others that aren't included in the eligibility. And so if you think about how the primary road network functions, it's generally a regional network. And not always, but in most cases it is. And so that would be one consideration to perhaps open it up a little bit more. Doing some sensitivity analysis to see what happens. And I think we did this initially, Chessa, but tweaking down the ADTs, you know, what happens if you ratchet it down by 5,000? What does that look like? And so forth. But I think that was done when we did our original analysis. I do think there is some merit to projects that cross jurisdictional boundaries. And that deserves some consideration. I don't know, maybe that's it, but I'll just put that out there. I think the primary routes, expanding the network to include all primary routes is definitely worth some serious consideration.
Thank you, Joe. Chester and then Barb.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that again, I think if we're going to talk about considerations for the rules, we got to figure out how we're going to define rules, because again, like Nora, you were agreeing that however we define it, if we define a route that crosses jurisdictions and it's, we have much of our county that's rural with the same unfundable projects that have the same redundancy benefits, flooding, you know, to get around and build out the network. I mean, we have all of that. So I think it's gonna, I want to cut to the chase essentially and say, you know, are we basically saying we're gonna partition out a part of the regional pot for rules is essentially where we're heading, because if you define rural, however you define it, much of Henrico, much of Chesterfield also has a lot of rural areas as well. And we would have projects, in those categories as well. And then that's back to, if we're cutting out a portion of the regional pot, that's what, back to what Barb was saying, is that we got 50%. And I recognize you guys split your pieces, Hanover and the town. And so that's where I keep landing back to, is what were the intent 10 of the pots. And if we try to define a separate criteria for just rural roadways, we also are going to have a ton of those as well that qualify. So I'm just throwing that out.
We have an active group today, Barb.
Yeah, I stand by what I said before, but I'm hearing the comments and definitely want to try to work on some sort of compromise that makes everyone happy, except I really do think we've got a lot of expensive rural projects that we got to deal with, or regional projects. Maybe we would have a category that's special considerations for the multi-jurisdictional and economic development or primaries, you know, where there's some sort of value placed, you know, if you've got all three, ooh, that's a lot. Or, you know, just one, that would help you overcome some of the criteria we already have in place, you know, volume thresholds or whatever. But, you know, maybe we could come up with a special considerations category. I don't really like the idea of setting aside money for rural. We've got 3 pots of money: transit, local, regional. The code doesn't talk about chopping it up more. So I don't support that idea. And I did want to ask, you know, whether the rurals on or have thought about revenue sharing projects, you know, accumulating CVTA local money that you're getting to get a dollar for dollar match with VDOT's revenue sharing program. It's very flexible as far as what projects they'll fund. So just wanted to mention that as an idea. But again, I, you know, don't know your situations. That might be a bad idea. That's all I got.
Thank you. I have Todd Steer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think I mostly agree with everything Barb just said. Not that I don't mean to sound surprised when I say that, but I like the special consideration option for, you know, what is this project, you know, put it on the applicant to say why it should be considered as a regional project. You know, how many boxes does it check? Is it multi-jurisdictional? Does it cross by crossing boundaries? Is it you know, a commuter route, but, you know, benefiting multiple jurisdictions? Is it potentially bringing economic development, and then make the case that way, as opposed to just artificially lowering you know, volume parameters, for example. I also agree with your point about revenue share. So I don't remember if that's on the same cycle as smart scale. It's the opposite, right? But if the focus is on kind of leveraging local funds, that's maybe a good thing. And also a question for Joe on your comments. You mentioned primaries and consideration of making all primaries eligible. I think primaries are a little different between jurisdictions, maybe not intentional by VDOT, but there's primaries in Henrico that you would drive on and not see it any different than a secondary road, like a minor collector road, whereas there's roads that are considered secondary that Henrico maintains that carry way more volume. So I guess, and if you had a better definition of what you mean by primaries, or if that's something that we need to work on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your comment there, Todd, that there are primaries that function like secondaries and vice versa. In Hanover, though, the primaries that are currently omitted that are clearly regional routes are 33 Mountain Road. The entirety of that is not included. The entirety of Route 54, for the exception of a small portion in the town, which is the major east-west primary, is not included. You know, in the same respect, Route 30 up near Kings Dominion is a primary, but you know, that, okay, maybe you can make an argument one way or the other, but not nearly as important as I would say 33 is, for example.
Okay, we have Austin and then Chet.
All right, this will be the last thing I'll bring up. I agree that, yes, I think defining it as primaries is probably too loose, because we've got one of our higher volume roads in the county is actually a secondary by VDOT, Fairground Road. It's one of our highest commuter routes. But I think when I was looking at the rural or the low population counties under a different light, I think what I was getting at is kind of where maybe this conversation landed, that there's some special criteria that if it doesn't check whatever vehicle per day box is set, whether it's 20,000 or if it's changed off of that, then there needs to be a special box off to the side that needs to be checked in order to get back into the eligibility list. And if it's those three, whether it's commuting, economic development, and I can't remember the third one that Barbie brought up, but if there's three boxes, special considerations, I think that's kind of what I was hoping that would come out of that, is that there needs to be other factors considered rather than just vehicles per day.
Awesome. Thank you. Chet?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the code. So specific to the 35%, remember the requirement, the authority has to develop a prioritization process based on objective and quantifiable analysis. So anything that we use has to be in the framework, should be data driven to determine what is eligible for regional funding. When we first went through this, the two things that got included in that framework that were not dependent on functional class or volume was presence on the arterial preservation network or a quarter of statewide significance. I think based on what I'm hearing today, if there's additional criteria, like Austin was just saying, then it's got to be something that we can show in a similar way to something like being a COSS. So that we can say we're following the code, it's objective criteria, it's not dependent on one location versus another, it's region-wide analysis, and that's kind of what I feel like we need to be doing as an authority to decide where the regional funding is. I mean, local funding and is a totally different thing. So I think specific to the 35%, I feel like that's kind of what we need to find. If there's some other criteria that we can add to the framework that would help the situation, then that's kind of what we need to search for.
Yeah, thank you, Chet. And one of the things I think I said early on is that there is some equitable challenges to traditional measurement of, cost benefit that leaves out qualitative aspects, in which we're kind of talking about right now. But I think that we can figure out a way to, I think we talked a little bit about when you brought up the quarters of statewide significance or the historic preservation, like whether or not those would be also additional information that somebody could put for economic development, commuter route, or multi-jurisdictional route. And so I think there probably are some elements, some variables that we could come up with that could allow for it to, be quantified in the entire process. I think that it's, it's necessary that we come up with some, again, some variables that we can measure and stay to the code. Joe?
Let's see, so I just posted a link to the functional classification map. And so if you do that, it kind of meets the objective I was just talking about with primaries. It's the arterials are not necessarily primary. So what's your north-south route in Goochland? Austin, is that what is that?
The north-south that I was talking about earlier?
Yes.
That's Route 522. Like that's a US route, but it doesn't qualify for any kind of.
Well, that would qualify if we were to include minor arterials, for example. In Charles City County, it would also bring in several minor arterials as well. So there might be some possibilities. And again, the arterial network is really designed, for the most part, as a regional network, just by its definition. Now, again, we can probably pick it apart and find instances where we would question why a certain route has received a functional classification. But at this scale, at the macro scale that we're working at, it might be the solution to what is causing angst among us in terms of eligibility.
Yeah, the map looks way different than the first map. So I guess as with the funding cycle conversation, we do agree that some type of either special consideration category or the addition of arterials is something that we want to further consider for changing the eligibility requirements. Everybody in agreement with that?
I agree, that's what we talked about, but I don't know that I'm ready to agree that that's a change I want to make. I was wondering.
No, we're just adding it on the list that at least it'll, continue on the list as consideration. Okay, Barb?
When we did the framework, the first round, I think we had some projects from all the localities, and we could go find that list again and maybe see what these special considerations, how that shakes out with those projects. And maybe we should ask people to resubmit their list, or in case there's stuff that's come up since then, just to see how things are shaken out, like if this is really helpful or if it's not going to really help.
Mm-hmm. So those on, especially our rurals, are you willing to submit a list? I know during the first cycle, we kind of tested to see what that looks like, like what you're asking for versus what would come out of the process.
This is Nora. I have my list. It's basically the same as the last list. I'm happy to copy and paste. I don't know if Chet wants to redo that effort, but I'd be happy to pass that along.
I have the list, so I can, maybe what I should do is circulate the list, and if you want to add or change anything, because I wrote down, I got Fairground in Goochland, I got Roxbury Road, Charles City, and we've got the portion through the town that's not covered, the main, what is that, England, Nora?
54, Route 54.
54. We've got 33 that Joe brought up, Route 30 near Kings Dominion. I mean, I've got a running list plus the old list, so I'll put a list together and circulate it, and you guys just send me what you want to add to it or revise. And I would just add on, what's nice is that we do have time now to work through this, because we had some consensus around applications going out next September. I was a little panicked because I was thinking we were going to be taking in apps this year, so we would have to work through eligibility changes. I know, but we do want to get it wrapped up, but I'm just saying, it seems like we do have some time to put this together and bring back the special consideration that we all can agree to, so that's good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Todd.
I think Chessa just covered it. I was going to say, I think the list needs to be recirculated for updates, changes, deletions, additions, just based on time having passed and having gone through the first round.
Okay, thank you. And then Nora, you still have your hand up. Did you still want to? Okay. So Chessa, I'm going to bring this item to close. And I guess we can continue it next month. and one, and maybe seeing if the list has, if you're able to work through that. If not, we'll move on to a few more items on the parking lot items that we have to keep talking through that. All right, we're gonna move to item 8, which is CVTA regional projects. And Chet, you're gonna have to remind me. I know I told you what I wanted. So on this one, I think what we want to do is take a look at our first round project list, and I guess have you all provide any updates that you have for any of the existing projects. I don't have a good idea of the percentage of them that are smart scale, waiting on smart scale, but if there were other projects on that list that you were interested or you'd like to begin to move forward, we did want to start to collect that information so that we can begin to get the spas developed for the localities in regard to those. Anyone have any comment on that? And I think the link is in the agenda chat.
Yeah, I just put it on the screen too.
So I guess a question, just out of being inquisitive, does anyone have any updates on any of these projects that need to move forward? Barb?
Yes, we need to move forward on some projects.
Okay, awesome.
But I wanted to ask, have we done the cash flow for the regional projects?
No, and that's one of the reasons why I'm asking about project readiness, because I guess, if some of them, what are our needs to put in the cash flow at the moment?
Yeah.
So Barb, I was going to say that we do have some preliminary cash flow stuff figured out from when we first put the list together, but it needs to be updated, and that's kind of where I didn't want to send that out because I knew that everybody had updated needs, even over the last few months.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at this list, it looks like Green City, we could use a cash flow on that. That Manchester connection could use a cash flow. We've got some projects on here that don't look like just smart scale leveraging. We've got some PE only projects down in our list. And I know every finance meeting, they want to see the cash flow. So I feel like I feel a lot of pressure to get that done, and would like to get that spreadsheet in everybody's hands, and understanding that if you're waiting on smart scale, you don't put anything in there. It's just waiting. But anything that you've got regional funds for and you want to get started, we can make an assumption on when spas are going to be executed.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would say that the assignment is definitely for everyone to take a look at this list and to, just mark and get them over to chat on which ones you need to move forward. So that way, I guess by next month, Chet, we could see the draft of the cash flow based on what folks put in. So I guess we need, after I get to Todd, we'll give a date on when everybody needs to give Chet which projects need to move forward. Todd?
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Barb was saying. We have looks like 3 non-smart scale projects that are already under design that we're going to need cash flow moving on, so we can certainly provide that schedule and cash flow need over the next several weeks. We won't have anything ready for finance by this Wednesday, but certainly by next finance or next TAC meeting for certain. And then one quick follow-up on that is, I know we're coming up on this agenda talking about fall line and spending plan for that. So maybe this is more of a check question. Do we want to keep the fall line spending and programming kind of separate from the full project list and not start mixing funding years, which from my vantage point, I think we probably can do that, and that might be easier for everybody to follow, because I mean, small line stuff is finally starting to move fairly quickly. So I think the goal was not to leave that first 2 years of money sitting around unspent, but if we're ready to start programming fall line between VDOT and the localities, probably just keep that separate, right?
Yeah, I would try, if you could do it, I think that would be good. And maybe even have a combine for those that want to see the combine. But definitely, of course, both of them together will be able to show the treasurer, what our needs are. But maybe for, if they can be combined, but we work with them separately. I don't know how well I would do it together. Chat.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's a reasonable request and a good idea. Keep them separate.
Awesome. Barb? You're muted, Barb, sorry.
I can share the cash flow spreadsheet. Maybe I can. I don't know if I'm allowed to share. I don't know if I know how to share.
You should
Oh,
be
here
able
it
to.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me give it a go. So much pressure. Oh, it's not that. Is it window? Window. I don't see my document when I do window. Okay, let me try something different. I think I got it. Okay. So we developed this template to use region-wide that, Chesterfield, spend down. Our projects are listed here. These guys that are grayed out are smart scale leveraging projects. But these are the projects that we could get going on or already started on with a quarterly guess at how much money we'll need by quarter. Information input on the individual locality spend down plans then gets rolled up into a summary page here. For Fall Line Trail, with this draft document, we've got Fall Line Trail listed, in Chesterfield. VDOT's administering it. So we had that under VDOT. But if it's Henrico, we would need to have that in the Henrico list, which I don't think it's in there, but it could be added. So I think trying to track Fall Line Trail on its own is inconsistent with how we're going to be tracking other projects, and it might need its own tracking. But for this cash flow exercise, I think it needs to kind of be jurisdiction and project wise, or who's administering it, and project focused. Everyone can see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I had one question in regard to VDOT administering, some of the localities projects. are they the ones that would then be doing the cash flow for those localities?
Right, because they're managing it, so they'll know how much they think they're going to spend in PE by quarter, and then right of way. So whoever's administering the project is the one that really should put down the anticipated cash flow.
And so I guess I have a question for VDOT in that if, like, for example, Hanover tells you a project that they would like to move forward, are you all going to be able to get the cash flow before next month?
I don't know that I can give you a good answer on that. I would think, depending on where it is in the process, that would probably be a pretty heavy lift with Smart Scale underway right now.
Mm-hmm.
So on this VDOT tab, there may be projects on this VDOT tab that a locality is really planning on administering. We just made a guess. So, you know, if this Bottom Bridge Park and Ride lot is really going to be administered by somebody else, we can just be stuck on the other localities tab.
Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't know who can answer this question, but I'll throw it out there. So for localities that are administering projects, at least projects in this cost range, and I'll look at you, Barb, to see if you nod your head one way or the other. I think we were thinking in the standard project agreement that it would be on a reimbursement basis, which kind of informs one way of setting up the spending plan when you're developing it. If it's VDOT administered, is the assumption that VDOT, is it going to be on a reimbursement basis to VDOT, or do they need the funding front-ended for administering a project?
How is the SPA written, right? Isn't there a VDOT CVTA SPA getting executed by the CTB? Is it a reimbursement, or is it a?
I don't think the phone line is a reimbursement.
I'm not positive. I'll try to pull it up right now and look.
And Jane, I didn't mean to put you on the spot on that one. I was just trying to think through this as we're talking about it.
Madam Chair, Eric may be able to address it.
Oh, sorry, Eric. I was feeling my fingers. Eric?
Yeah, I should have just looked. I'm sorry. Yeah, I believe the SPA provides that please forgive me if this is wrong, but I believe by recollection that the SPA provides that VDOT will bill the CVTA for costs incurred as the project progresses. But we can look into that to confirm, but I believe that's how the process is supposed to work.
It does appear to be a reimbursement.
Hey, Shane.
It is reimbursement.
Okay, Shane, sorry. I have a his name Shane. Okay, so I guess that question, Barb, how much of a cash flow are we really going to potentially have by October with VDOT having a lot of, well, some of them on their list that they can't get to? Do we just want to have for those locality administered, or do we want to VDOT?
Well, I would
do November.
Yeah, I would suggest distributing that spreadsheet for people to start working on. And I
And I
would think
know
there's someone at VDOT that could work on this, you know, not everybody's doing smart scale. So, I mean, right, there are other people keeping the boat floating. So I just feel like it is a priority for the Finance Committee, and we've been putting it off. It comes up every meeting.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Todd.
I'll concur with Barb, and it does come up every time at finance. So at a minimum, the localities can start working on it. And then I think VDOT has already provided their spend plan for the at least part of the fall line. So you know, we can plug in what we have and then just fill in the rest soon.
Okay, sounds good. So we are gonna work. So let me just look at a calendar. So is it the 30th? When is our next TAC?
I believe it's the 10th. I just put in the chat that we'll send her on the spreadsheet if everybody can take a look at it and include your updated information and then send it back. Ideally, I'd like to get everything in hand. If that's not the way to go, if you want to just send me your updated information, I'd like it by the 26th. So then we have time to get everything put together in one location for the meeting on the 10th.
Okay, so you need 2 weeks to do that. And that
Well, you need a week, but we got to send out the agenda.
Okay, awesome. So that gives us about 2 weeks to get Chet the information. If you need to by September 26th. All right, we're still having fun, y'all. Stay with us. Are there any more questions on this? Good, we'll move to item 9. And this is the request to reprogram FY 23-26 CVTA regional funds. Goochland sent in a letter to me to include this item on the agenda. Goochland County, there you go, is requesting to reprogram 16.8 million from Route 288, new southbound auxiliary lane south of US 250 to the I-64 at Ashland Road, Route 623 interchange DDI project. There is approximately 16.884 million currently allocated to the Ashland Road DDI project, which is for 2-lane DDI design. Due to a recent rezoning of a 650,000 square foot for a distribution center known as Project Rocky, that's adjacent to this interchange. This project will create upwards of a $500 million investment in Goochland and the region. It's determined that the 2-lane DDI is not sufficient, and Goochland must proceed with a 4-lane DDI. The funds Goochland is asking to reprogram position the project to be very competitive for other funding opportunities. Goochland has received numerous letters of support for the project, as well as a commitment from the governor's office to identify the funding needed to close the gap. Again, this is a recommendation. They're seeking a recommendation of approval to this request to forward to the Finance Committee. I will open the floor to Austin to explain or answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's pretty much the gist of it. I will say that, and I sent around some background on Thursday of last week just to try to keep the conversation here as short as possible. I just didn't want this to take, 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm hoping that that background itself answered some questions that may have come up otherwise today. There are kind of two parts that's not really clear in the letter. The second part is that the project we're deallocating funds from, we do want to remain open and eligible because it is very much a regional project that we want to see move forward. But the funds they need to be reprioritized for our purposes now, and then we would plan on chasing that project in future CVTA rounds. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I thought you had two things you were going to clarify.
Well, it was just the one thing to clarify. So we're really requesting two items. It's to reprogram the money. And then number two is to keep that southbound auxiliary lane project open and eligible for funding in the future.
Mhm. Do you have any questions, Todd?
So, question for Austin. So
Yep.
for the 288 auxiliary lane project, that's fully funded with CBTA regional and is not contingent on smart scale, correct?
So it is and it isn't fully funded. I kind of brought this up last TAC meeting that it's fully funded to that third party estimate. However, it's not a VDOT validated estimate. So VDOT would not consider it fully funded. Seeing that it was fully funded to the third party estimate, the TPO dropped it from their smart scale list. So it is not a part of any smart scale application. Those funds since it's not fully funded, those funds aren't tied to any specific schedule, which is why we felt that we could move them to the Ashland Road DDI. Barb, do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess it's a matter of opinion whether 288 is fully funded or not.
I don't think VDOT's the only opinion that kind of matters for us because they're going to administer the project. So if they tell us it's not fully funded, it's not fully funded.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, I was wondering, this on the screen says you have a commitment from the governor's office. How much
So we've gotten
have?
several, there's no dollar term or no dollar figure expressed in the letter, but we've gotten letters of commitment from the chief of staff of the governor's office, as well as commitment. And we're awaiting the actual letter to have it in hand, but from the Secretary of Transportation, as well as the Secretary of Commerce. So the two offices of the governor's administration plus the governor's office have expressed their support about getting this DDI project fully funded as soon as possible.
Is it more like a letter of support to go along with applications, or is it really?
So from the Secretary of Commerce and Secretary of Transportation, it's letters of support to back up this request to reprogram the CVTA funds. The letter of support from the governor's office, his chief of staff, was to kind of aid in the rezoning application as far as, yes, it's a worthwhile project that the governor's office and his administration want to see built in the region.
Todd?
So question for Austin is a kind of a follow-up. So I assume the governor's office and the secretary's office is aware that this is a pending smart scale application. So
correct. Everybody's very well aware of that. VDOT, as well as the Secretary of Transportation and the governor's office, have said that this transfer of funds, of the CBTA funds, is crucial in getting the project fully funded through smart scale.
Nora?
Hi, three separate thoughts.
Okay.
One, have you looked at economic development funds? I think it's not TPOF. but there are economic development funds and they're pretty easy to get.
We looked at TPOF. That was something that came up early on. Those funds we wouldn't qualify for due to the cost of living here in Goochland County. The median income within the county itself is too high.
Oh, yeah, we don't have that problem. And the next thing is, I mean, selfishly, personally, I'd like to get this project funded. It definitely is a necessary project today, much less when you get a distribution center in. It's definitely needed. My question is, and I feel like some of you who do this on a daily basis can answer, how does this request impact us in the future for other similar requests? I mean, on the surface, sounds like, yeah, this makes just move some money over and here this project is taken care of. But how does it impact in the future? Say I get regional money on a project that got vetted, went through the process, and then I decide I like another project better and I want to move it forward faster. And so is the process I just come and ask to have my money flip-flop? Because it's not really
so I'll
money.
say this, that what our goal is not is to set a precedent where you come in with a smaller scope or you kind of have this game plan in the back of your mind when you submit your projects. That's not what we came in with at all. The background, I think, clearly shows that we were pursuing full well a 2-lane DDI design with VDOT's recommendation that was a legitimate fix out to, I believe, 2040. And through this rezoning, it was determined that there were actually flaws in that analysis that led to the recommendation for a reduced scope. So I think that with the outside circumstances, one being the analysis that had some flaws, and then number two, with the rezoning, it does kind of fall in line with the actions of the CVTA in the past, both with the Hard Shoulder Running Lane project in Powhatan and Goochland, and then also the Fall Line Trail, where it didn't follow the guidelines exactly, much like what you're getting at, Nora, where future projects and future asks may not follow the guidelines, but when there's outside circumstances and there's recognition that the project definitely serves the region and it's a very important project, that the CVTA went ahead and voted to do those particular things.
And Nora, if I could add just a point of clarity, both projects that Goochland is speaking of were ranked and on the regional prioritization list, and Goochland would be moving dollars allocated to Goochland from one project on the list to another project on the list.
And that project is higher. So we're moving money from the 15th ranked project to the 9th ranked project as it currently stands. Obviously with the new costs, that the rankings would be changed. But the benefit wise, with what not taking into account the cost, we're still moving it up because the DDI was scored as the eighth top highway benefit. So obviously with added cost, the cost benefit would go down, but we are moving it up in the region rather than the other way around.
I have Todd and then Barb.
So first off, I will concur with what Nora said. I mean, I think we very much support this project getting funded and built as well. But two, I guess, concerns I'm going to raise is number one, the funding of the 288 auxiliary lanes is a project that we, the region and the CVTA voted to fund. Henrico, in fact, is counting on that project getting built in relatively short period of time, because that's in our base build package for short pump improvements, including a proposal for a new interchange at North Gayton. So we've already accounted for that in our documentation, the report that's going to VDOT and FHWA. So to cancel that project is concerning at this point, no matter where the money goes. And secondly, the framework document is pretty clear that if you cancel a project, the funding goes back to balance entry, and it basically would need to go through another scoring process. So to make the exception and say, well, we're going to pull all the money off of this and put it on another project is really a regional decision and not something that, you know, a particular locality can have authority to do. And that's consistent with the way pretty much every funding program that we work with, from Smart Scale to revenue share, works. If you cancel a project, it goes back to the full pot. It doesn't stay within that locality to move around. I wish it did, because that's how revenue share used to be years ago, and it gave us a lot more flexibility. But for the greater good, VDOT changed the rules.
Well, and go back to something I said earlier, that we don't want to cancel this project. It's still a project that Goochland County wants to see done. It's going to benefit our West Creek campus immensely. It's going to benefit Capital One. We've actually had good luck with traffic on Route 288 because of COVID with Capital One at home. But those campuses are starting to go back with some hybrid models, and the auxiliary lane is definitely something we want to see done. To your point about it being noted to be fully funded, I don't know if it could be counted as fully funded in the scenario for your study, because it's not fully funded, and VDOT's going to administer the project, and ultimately they kind of have the say about if it's fully funded or not. And what they've told me is that it's not fully funded, and it's currently not a smart scale application. So there's certainly no guarantee for a schedule for that project to be done anytime soon, even if we kept the $16.8 million on it now.
Okay, I am gonna call for a motion based on this letter that Goochland sent. Again, the motion would be to recommend approval of Goochland's request to reprogram funds and to not cancel 288, but keep 288 open for future funding. Is there a motion on that request?
Nobody else will. So moved.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second on this item? I'll second the item. Janice, can you call the roll call, please?
May we have discussion first?
Yes, sir.
Just briefly, because I haven't commented, but this is difficult because Hanover supports the project. In fact, Hanover will benefit as much as any locality from this improvement. But for the reasons stated, we can't get behind it at this point. I think we need to be consistent going forward. I can't really speak to specifics as to some of the other things, but as we refine our processes and establish those things, I think we just need to stick to that process. And that's the reason I'm just not going to be able to support it for Hanover's part.
I mean, to your point, Joe, I think that, we do recognize that, number one, CVTA is flexible and has been flexible in the past, and that there's been two very regionally significant projects, the hard shoulder running lane on 288 and the fall line trail, that went in direct conflict with the guidelines. And yes, this is kind of the next one up. And I know once you open Pandora's box, you don't know what's going to come out of it, which is why I think the rewrite of the guidelines, however they get tweaked, is so important, because we can kind of, now that we've seen the scenario go through one round, we kind of know some of the flaws and some of the things that weren't accounted for, couldn't have been accounted for. And I mean, there was discussion not 45 minutes ago that the scenario just like this could be worked into the guidelines, where you've got a mid-year situation, whatever it is, an outside circumstance that should be accounted for to some degree. And currently the guidelines don't allow for that. And we're talking about maybe revising the guidelines in the future to account for it. So I think if that's the case, and you can't support it, I think that it's disappointing, because we're talking about maybe having this exact same scenario written into the guidelines next round.
Thank you, Austin. Barb?
Yeah, I thought that our discussion on the framework document, really, we were saying pretty intentionally that a locality can bring a request in off cycle, and maybe I'm using off cycle and mid cycle wrong, but they certainly can make that request and it can be considered, but from a staff perspective, from a technical committee perspective, I think it's important for us to think about our framework document and process, and you know, it can move forward from us, but our recommendation would be that probably not to support the project because it's not going through the process.
Well, we've already done it twice with Fall Line Trail and the Route 288 Hard Shoulder Running Lane. So to say that, okay, we're not following the guidelines and we're not following the process, I think is, I don't think that's the right say there, because we've already shown that we've gone against it twice.
Okay,
and we're just the next one up.
Thank you, Austin. Todd?
So I won't belabor the last point, but question for Austin, not knowing the details of the conversation with the governor's office and the secretary's office, but obviously there's a waiting required to see how it shakes out in smart scale and
right,
and where that scores and how much additional money can be brought to the project. Does it put Goochland in a good place that knowing the outcome of smart scale mid 23, knowing that there's another round of CVTA regional coming up in September, that there can be a level of confidence that Goochland can convey to the governor and secretary of transportation office that this is being discussed at a regional level. We have verbal support from our regional partners to apply for additional money through the CBTA regional process. Is that not sufficient to satisfy them on their potential funding commitments?
Not knowing that we were, I guess, not really sure how the CBTA was going to work out as far as the applications, whether it's going to be every other year, every year. No, we haven't talked about what that next CBTA round is going to look like. All the conversation directed to us has been, it's very vital that this reprogramming, I'll call it, happens as far as getting it fully funded as soon as possible. Because we want, ideally, it to align as much as possible with the Project Rocky construction that may be operational 25, maybe 2026, if we were to get this reprogram and then the smart scale funds this cycle. We're probably looking at construction ending 28 because we've got a significant chunk of those funds allocated through CBTA, which are ready pretty quickly. But if the policy board will, I'm sure, have their own conversation about this, but if for some reason, this doesn't happen, we'll have whatever conversations we need to have with the governor's office and the different secretaries' offices to come up with a plan.
Madam Chair, if I could add one more, raise one more point of concern, and that's if the governor's office or the Secretary of Transportation's office, much like we experienced with the CTB, kind of trying to strong arm the CBTA into, picking projects and unfunding projects, that the goal of having the regional authority is for the regional authority to make decisions and not have others outside the region trying to make those decisions for us.
Barb, are you done?
Yeah, sorry. Would it, is it possible, or would it be helpful for us to get the updated 288 Ox Lane estimate from VDOT and the updated 64 Ashland estimate? And run those through the scenario? I guess probably not, because there's probably a bunch of projects that need updated. I was just wondering if it would be helpful to get those numbers updated and see how things shake out.
So we did work with Chet and staff for not the Route 288 project, but the Ashland Road project, and it would score. The benefit remains the same, not including Project Rocky. It still scores 8th, but the cost benefit goes down to the 19th. So it does score just above I-64. I think that, so what VDOT relayed to me was that we would need these funds to be allocated at the latest in the October meeting if this reprogramming were to go through, because then that's as late as they could count it for this round of Smart Scale, which is why the request is coming to y'all today. One question on that, Chet, just will this, whichever way the TAC votes, will this request be in 2 weeks at the policy board level, or will it be October 29th, 28th?
I was gonna say, I think it would potentially go, if it doesn't come out of here, it could be requested at either the finance committee or the full body meeting, which is the 23rd of September.
Right.
Is the full body, and just this Wednesday is the finance committee.
Okay.
All right, does that conclude our discussion? Ms. Firestone, take a roll call vote, please.
Oh, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Have you considered putting CVTA local on it?
With the pocket change we get, no. We get $200K a month, I'll just be honest. I mean, it's in the spreadsheet that goes out. We've got a lot of those funds on sidewalk projects and studies and some things like that, I mean, I think with all the money we've received to date, you wouldn't notice it. It's $3.5 million, I think, with everything we've received to date from CVTA local. So it wouldn't do anything for it.
All right, Ms.
Are you
Firestone.
ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Amos? Ms. Amos? We'll go back to Ms. Amos. We'll move on to Mr. Mitchell. Ms. Russell? Can you hear me?
This is Noel. I can hear you. Do you mind repeating the motion?
Want me to do it, Janice?
It is a motion to approve the request to reprogram the funds for Goochland County.
As requested. So the motion is to approve what was requested. Sorry, I just want to make sure I got this right.
Yes.
Okay, no.
Okay. Thank you. And we have Mr. Mitchell. Do we have Mr. Mitchell with us now? Ms. Russell? Vice Chair Smith?
No.
Mr. Goin?
Yes.
Mr. Vadunez?
No.
Mr. Yor?
No.
Mr. Stauder? Mr. Shardine? Vice Chair Clark?
Yes.
Give me 1 second and let me check and see if we have some of the people that I didn't receive an answer for. I believe that they have left us. And that would give us a vote of 4-2. The motion failed.
All right, thank you. We're gonna move on to item 10. That's the fall line working group update. for this item, VDOT was able to put a table together. I was just reading my messages, sorry. And let's see, so Chet, and I know you have to go. Do we wanna, does Janice have the table or should I share the table?
Yeah, I put the table in the chat earlier, so hopefully everybody has that like at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, awesome.
And I
If
think
you could share-
VDOT is with us, so they could probably share their screen too.
Check for anybody who joined the meeting a little bit later, it may be helpful to share it in the chat again.
Can you all hear Mark talking?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Chet, are you sharing it again?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay, awesome. So it's available in the chat. Is everyone able to see it? No. I can share.
Dorona, if it would be helpful, we can give a quick summary of what that spreadsheet, what that does as a follow-up from the working group discussion last week.
Yes, that's fine. So I have it at the top of it. If you'd like to give that discussion update, that would be great.
All right, so I'm gonna let Liz go into some of the details, but essentially what we were trying to do was to identify the segments of the Fall Line Trail that are funded, the ones that maybe have been suggested as possible next phases or segments for inclusion for some of the unallocated CVTA dollars at this point. And then at the end, kind of total it up to how much is the quote unquote ask that's on the table right now. And it really does fall down to a couple of takeaway messages, I think. Number one, the needs for the unfunded segments of the trail exceed the dollars we have. But the dollars that have been asked for at this point slightly exceed the amount of dollars that are available on the from the CBTA allocation last December. So if you recall, last December, approximately $104 million was allocated by CBTA to the Fall Line Trail. And the only commitments that have been earmarked at this point out of that have been for the SPA agreement for the northern design build segment and the SPA agreement that is in draft for the southern segment right now. What we talked about at the Fall Line Trail Working Group is that there is an expectation that there may need to be some additional dollars coming in for the northern segment to anticipate some cost increases there. Same thing may happen on the southern segment. And that's essentially what we tried to quantify in the spreadsheet that you have in front of you right now. So again, we worked on pulling this together after the Fall Line Trail Working Group. Again, we welcome anybody's review, suggestions, recommendations for any edits or updates. Where we had updated estimates from a locality that is working actively on some of their own segments that may be locally administered, we tried to include them as we had them. If we did not have them, we anticipated using some of the FY27 or calendar 27 estimates that we had shared with CVTA about a year ago. So with that's the 70,000 foot view of what this spreadsheet is showing. The asks are essentially we've outlined a design build or build package number 3 option that could pick up from the southern segment in Chesterfield as an option that if CVTA desires, we could certainly put a package together that includes doing that. Enrico and the city of Richmond have suggested what could be next segments within their jurisdictions as well. And we've tried to quantify that on the table. Column J is reflective of that column, and you can see the total at the bottom of column J. It exceeds the dollars that are available at this point.
And one question, Mark, when you say that and we look at this budget, you are including the CVTA regional and the CTB money, as you have those segments still in this spreadsheet currently, right? They're still in column J.
Correct.
Design build.
No, column J is the ask, regardless of the funding source.
Yeah.
Column J, right.
Any funded, any CTV or CVTA money programmed to a project would fall under either column G or H.
Right. So column J is what we are aware of in terms of what potentially could be asks at this time for segments of the trail to apply funding to next.
Well, I guess my question is, you have the total here at 105, and I'm trying to discern that total between, so you're saying that the CTB dollars are not in column J?
So column J is a request. So that means money that has not yet been funded. The budget you were just looking at, that's money that exists today. So the column J is not the total balance to complete the whole trail. It's the portion for potential design build 3, the projects that you and Todd told me the asks for. So that's all that's in column J, is the ask, a potential ask of the CVTA, what to do with the remaining of the 104. So if you kind of follow from F, column F.
Why wouldn't like DB3 come out of the CTB money? I'm not sure exactly why we're not adding the balance.
The CTB money was primarily, it's supposed to be used for
that is
outside.
Not true. That's not true. The region, that money was committed based on the region setting aside $104 million. And I'm not sure where the caveat about outside of CVTA boundaries that became allocated to.
Duran, I can help with that a little bit. If you click on the FLT budget tab at the bottom, what we are identifying right now is that in the first box in the upper left, CTB allocated December of last year also 42 million and change. We've committed 21, almost 22 million to the southern segment. We anticipate the need for potentially another 8 million for the southern segment, similar to some of the cost increases we've seen elsewhere. And we anticipate the need for allocating some dollars to projects that prior to any of this effort were really anticipated to be a little bit narrower. So a small allocation there to cover some cost increases for some wider widths. What that does essentially is leave 10 million uncommitted out of the CTB money. Second tab down, we see the 104 million that was allocated by CBTA in December of last year. There are 2 SPA agreements right now that are in draft form. SPA agreement number 1 for the design build 1 and SPA agreement that's in draft form right now as a design build number 2. What those balances, when you take the 8.3 and 8.2 million out of that, leave 87 million and change between those two, or after those two, excuse me. So available dollars for allocation that are on the table and not yet allocated would be the 87 and the 10, exactly. And that puts us at a number that is still slightly less than the 105 that is an ask on the table right now.
And so I guess one of the things that I would ask is Chesterfield with the majority of the previously committed funds for Fall Line being attributed to Chesterfield, would you be willing to lower your request by the necessary dollar amount?
So one thing about the Chesterfield, that request, we took a look at what the next most feasible design build section would be. So I don't know that we could just simply reduce the request. We could go back and look at if there's ways to make that a smaller package, maybe a less expensive package.
Yeah, but what I see, for example, I see DB3 clearly in column E, but then there's some other like Chesterfield County. I thought I saw some that were not.
There are some projects that are funded and that balance has been removed. Like that money counts toward the need. Right. So if there's a row that says it's part of Design Build 3, and it also has a UPC, the funding that is on that existing UPC is removed from the total cost of the need for the Design Build 3.
Yeah, and so what is your Design Build 3 total cost?
I have to add that up real quick for you.
Okay, thank you. While you do that, Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mark and Liz, can you speak to the funding that was included in the state budget that I think is on the right-hand columns under the budget tab?
At this point, Tom, we are not aware of exactly where those dollars would be able to be used. So there's potential dollar amounts out there. We just don't know at this point what they're going to be able to be applied to. Shane, I'm not sure if you have any additional information on that.
Mark, I don't know if Shane is still with us. Oh, well, he is. Maybe he stepped away.
So if I could, so Mark, it was my understanding that it was going to be some sort of set aside for 3 of the regional trails across the state, including Fall Line. I never saw the final language, so I don't know where that landed, but I guess my question is, what degree of confidence do you have at this point that at least some of that will be earmarked for Fall Line?
So I'll have to check, Todd. Last I remember, there was not a specific, it did mention trails like the Fall Line Trail, but it did not have a dollar amount attached to it.
So I think there could be a confidence level that Fall Line is likely to be a recipient, but of how much, we have no idea.
And I can say that the first HB 30 year 1 and HB 30 year 2, the 7 million, that's coming off the top out of the TAP program, and it's going to be, I believe, competitively based, application based.
And then
the 37, part of that goes to the state trails office, but there was not a specific dollar amount.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Liz, did you get the dollar amount yet?
Yeah, the total cost, I haven't deducted what's funded from it, but the total cost of DB3 is around 43 million. But some of that is funded. I'm still doing the math to figure out how much of that is funded.
Okay. And then I was just trying to quickly look at the DB2 and what is occurring in Chesterfield. And I see Barb's hand up. Barb? You're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm having trouble with the spreadsheet. To me, it looked like DB3 was 38.7. Because I thought we were supposed to add column J. I thought that was the
column. That's the ask.
Column J is the ask, and I think what Jerona was inquiring about was what is the total cost regardless. So and J would be the total in J would be the total project cost less the dollars that are already on sections of those projects.
Oh, I thought that was what Liz was saying she couldn't figure out. So
It's about 38 million if you deduct what's funded.
Oh, sorry.
38.7.
Yep, 38.7.
Okay. And then I can easily see, I think the city's request is 19. Is that
I
right?
think they have a couple. They have a 19, a 5, and I think a 3. They have a couple different segments: Manchester, Commerce, and Bryant Park.
What is yellow? What does yellow mean?
That's a request. It means it's being requested of the CBTA, or a potential request. Yellow is if they yellow is supposed to mean we need a potential request.
So the city's requesting 19.
We requested a little bit more than 19, Barb. I think it's
Oh, there it is down
24.
there. I'm sorry. 19 plus 3.
And this
22.
5
And
right
5.
here.
It's not yellow.
I don't know why, but
That just might have been an oversight. Is that what Bryant Park or
Manchester?
yeah, that's
Bridge.
that's Manchester Bridge.
Okay, so 38.7 is Chesterfield, 27 is Richmond, and what is Henrico?
I think they're 35, but actually Chesterfield has to count the DB2 segments that it has already as well. So what they're doing with
Well,
the design
you guys have
build-
segments. You guys have segments also. What I was asking about right now is just the requests that's been made. So, like there's.
but they are deducting from the total amount based on. So to me, all of them are requests, and that would be in the funding plan, which is one of the errors that I find in the spreadsheet as far as submitting it. Although they have already gotten the CVTA approval on the DB2 and 1.
Yeah. At this moment in time, was just trying to figure out how much people were asking for.
Your volume is low, Barb.
Could you not hear me?
No, now I can hear you better. Thank you.
Yeah. At this point in time, I was just trying to figure out what people were asking for beyond design build 1 and 2. That was my only question, trying to figure out the spreadsheet.
And our intent, Barb, was to show that in column J. So if we captured anything incorrectly, our apologies on trying to do that, but that was our intent with column J.
Okay, so then for Henrico, it's roughly 39.9.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Todd.
No, actually it's less than that, Barb. If you give me a second, I can pull the exact number unless Liz has it already up.
Yeah, I thought it was like 35.5.
Yeah, it's right around 35, which fully funds everything in Henrico, and potentially it's slightly less than that. We have to go through pulling out some of the line items for the design. I'm sorry, for the furnish and install package, which was also, I guess, and something that was sent out Friday. So we have to meet internally. So we likely will be reducing the ask for one of our phases and potentially 2 to reflect that. But we don't know what the number is yet.
And if I may, Todd, the reason it's 39 on the spreadsheet is I pulled straight from the SIP. So I think some of that funding might be moving around.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I didn't catch that on your spreadsheet, but yeah, based on our updated estimates, Barb, we're really closer to 35 to fully fund after all the local and other grant funding.
And one other point I just wanted to make was, Chesterfield has a a lot of fall line trail mileage in our locality. So because we got design build 3 doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't be getting more funding. We've got a lot to build.
I'm not talking, again, I'm not speaking on design build 3 only. I mean, we have to consider the design build 2, which is in Chesterfield. I think when I looked at it early on, both Chesterfield and Richmond had over
Yeah, I
90
might have said-
million worth of fall on trail needs,
Mhm.
unfunded needs. And as of now, if DB3 along with 2, or 1, I think it's 2, whichever one that is in Chesterfield, 2, thank you. You're achieving like, I don't know, 70, 80 million of your 90 million requests. I mean, needs.
Well, it would be nice if we could compare it that way, but I feel like maybe our 90 million estimate was from a while ago.
Oh yeah, that was the one from the last iteration of this spreadsheet that VDOT had done.
Yeah, I don't really know currently what those estimates are, which brings me to one other thing I was going to ask for. I'd like to get from VDOT on the design build 1 and 2, their engineer's estimates, their original estimate, and then the revised estimate, and just a little summary of why the costs have gone up. I think that's going to be important. Our authority members are going to want to see that kind of documentation moving forward.
We can certainly get that. And I would just also say, you know, we're throwing out an option at this point in terms of where potentially we may be able to assist with another segment. You know, what we're trying to do with this spreadsheet is at least share with folks what we are aware of. But we also know that this is the first time you guys have seen this updated spreadsheet in the last couple of days here. So we would certainly welcome anybody taking a look and making sure that we got the asks correctly and that we represented it correctly. Because again, we respect that this is the first time you guys are seeing this.
And then what on this budget sheet here, what does this CVTA regional year 3+ mean?
Those were additional actions taken that we found in resolutions and meeting minutes that were taken, I believe, if you scroll to the right, I think it was in April. Your screen's not showing anymore, just FYI.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Scrolling to.
Yeah, I was clicking too much and then, okay, here we go.
Yeah, like in row 32, looking through the meeting minutes, there was 11 million allocated in the April of last year to commerce, specifically Fall Line Trail.
Those are the 2 projects that were a part of the regional prioritization? Yeah, so I'm not sure why those are in this year 3+. They need to be in one of these 2, which even would further lessen the balance. Because I'm just not sure what this, because what is that allocation? I mean, where is it coming from?
I just went off what was in the meeting minutes.
So Barb, wouldn't you agree that that would be something that's like up here?
I don't know, but I think Todd knows. I think those 2 projects were funded out of the CVTA Fall Line Trail number. So instead of it being 104, we would subtract that out of that.
That is correct.
So if that is correct, then the number up top would become lower than the 87.
Oh, I had another thing. And that budget sheet isn't showing the increase needed for design build 1, right?
I think it is. I think that 12 million is.
Oh, that's the extra.
For design build one,
Yeah,
are you asking about design build one on the budget sheet?
yes.
The budget sheet does not reflect, because it hasn't been officially allocated, so it does not been deducted from that overall 104. But if you look on the column J, it does exist in the ask. So the fall line trail budget is really only supposed to reflect what action has been taken on. And then the addition, like I said, the additional money that's needed for DB1 and DB2 is reflected in the ask column J.
Okay, so it looks as if there is, between the CTB money and the CVTA money, it looks like there's about 98 million left, but that doesn't subtract out the 11 million for the commerce projects. And it doesn't subtract out the increases on design build package 1 and 2.
That's correct.
And how much is that?
We estimated 5 for design build 1 and 8 for design build 2.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, I feel like I'm just catching up.
Ooh,
Are you still on your call?
kind of, but not really.
All right. I was just checking to see, do you have to get my finger?
Who is this?
Okay. Well, you can call me back.
All right.
Well, that's Joy. Joy, we can hear you.
Okay, so that means there's like 74 million, which everyone probably already knew, except me.
Oh yeah, I can't even take all that out of here. Already zero, but never. Let's push them. Oh yeah, plus the. Joe, I know you could do all of this much cooler than me. Yeah, that's your number. And so now it's the 74 number plus the 105 is compared to the 105 number. So we're over by 30 million. All right, so I guess, Todd, what do you want some of our next steps to be? Looking at this. Yeah, of 30.
Yeah.
I guess the one, I don't know. Go ahead.
So it sounds like we need to do a little bit more math, maybe, to see where this lands. And Liz and Mark, I don't know if there's any way y'all can get any further clarity from the state on the other pots of money, and other than we know some of it will be through the TA process, but there was that additional 37, whatever it was, million. So it's kind of hard to program that when we don't know what that number is. So I don't know that we have the full funding picture at this point. Plus, we also have to kind of talk through the furnish and install and start figuring out what kind of budget we're going to need for that and timing for that. So it sounds like there's some more effort needed at the fall line working group, and then maybe additional offline conversations and coordination with VDOT.
Todd, if I may, real quick, I think, we can certainly touch base with the Trails office and see whether or not there's any information that, anything that's been decided, anything that may be available for sharing. And so we can certainly reach out to see what is actually available relative to those other pots. Also, any offline work that we can assist with, we're happy to do that together with Chet or frankly anybody that you guys would want us to. We just stand ready to help if that would be useful.
So Mark, does that mean there is a Trails office now?
We also need to check into that as well. I think that the concept of that office being put together, I think is still being developed at this point. I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm not as up to speed with exactly what that status is, but we can certainly reach out to the folks that do know and make sure that the working group is aware.
Understood. Thank you.
All right, with that, it doesn't look like that we can approve a spending plan that exceeds its dollar amount of 30 million by 30 million. So we'll move to item 11. Are there any other CVTA TAC member comments? Hearing none, our next meeting will be.
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
We should probably block off larger hunks of time for the meetings. I think we lost some people.
Yeah, we got kind of long.
It was.
Yeah, we'll think about that, Chet, when we look at the next agenda. I'm sorry, I apologize. Again, our next meeting is going to be October 10th. If there's
Chair Clark, the 10th is Columbus Day.
Oh, okay.
So we had looked at, and I know that's on the agenda. We hadn't pinned down a new date yet, but
you asked me about the 12th.
Yes, we were thinking Wednesday the 12th.
We don't do Columbus Day in Chesterfield.
We do. Well, would it be after the Finance Committee meeting? Am I the right one?
Yes, it would be at 1 o'clock, the same time. So we would do finance in the morning and then have CVTA TAC at 1.
Does anyone have any conflicts with that so far? Okay, we're good with that. So the next meeting will be the Wednesday, October the 12th. 1 o'clock. All right, with that, we'll move for adjournment. Thanks, everyone. Good meeting. Long meeting, but good meeting.
It was a good meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.